there are a lot of saints from ancient and to the present time. And I'm going to talk about one of them from the ancient, Joseph. We all know Joseph was one of the 12 tribes of Israel and a son of Jacob and his wife Rachel. And he's also known as a righteous one. He, his father favored him from the other brothers, and they got jealous and sold him into slavery. And ultimately, he became a ruler of the land, second only to the king Pharaoh. But he did not reach to the top that easily. He had experienced pain and anguish that accompanied him throughout part of his life journey. Many people today goes through the same deep suffering every day in our lives. Uh, and for them, this is kind of a prison too. Pain is kind of prison. I can try to relate them with the same connotation. And this prison, to name a few, can be either a disease or financial hardship or COVID-19 in this time. Like now, if you look at your computer screen, we are all in our small windows. That alone is a prison. We should be, celebrating together and in one place, but pandemic kept us apart from each other. This morning, I'm going to take a look at the story of Joseph in prison. Perhaps Joseph's story will help us to learn things we are facing daily in our life, trials and other things come across in daily life. Joseph is not alone. Joseph was in the Bible, he was the first person to be put in the prison. Joseph, he was not that alone, but there are many who was in prison also, people of God. Because we live in the wicked world without humanity and dignity. That's why these people are just in prison for doing no wrong. But these men of God, each of them behave in his prison in a way that deserves to be paused and studied in depth. Joseph was 17 years old child when he was in prison. If we look why he was in prison, he was just 17. Because he refused to do evil. And Jeremiah also was in prison. Jeremiah who wept for the people of the Lord, whom the Lord chose from his mother's womb, was in prison. Why? Because Jeremiah spoke the word of the Lord. And if we look at John the Baptist, whom the Lord said, there is no greater man among those born of women than John. He was in prison. Why? Because he told Herod the truth. You have no right to live with your brother's wife. This is the world. This is truly the world of impurity and injustice that imprison the honest, innocent, and religious. And Peter was in prison by order of the Herod. And last of not the least, famous Paul, who gave his life to Jesus Christ in spreading the good news, he spent the rest of his life and died in the prison. Just remembering these names today, Reverend Joe called in the beginning of the worship, and God's people name, we can see what they went through, pain and suffering in the prison. This is great indication of the character of the world in which we live. Through these prisons and injustice these righteous people have been subjected to, there are some lessons we can learn from. When we deal with Joseph in his prison, we can say in the world of pain, if we consider prison as a pain, that God is with us in the world of pain. C.S. Lewis, Christian apologist, says, God knows our pain. Pain and suffering are a part of life that we all wish would just go away at times. However, it also an instrument of God to stir within us a desire for a change. Joseph in his prison, nothing was written about Joseph when he was on throne, but when he was in prison, it was mentioned 4 times in the Bible that the Lord is with him in his troubles. Joseph remind me of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But I don't know if Joseph knew that time. I believe he don't. Joseph went through all this tribulation in his life and trials as a young man. And if we look at suffering of the other prisoners, let's take a Jeremiah, for example. In the world of suffering, we have to serve the God. And this is when we learn from Jeremiah. Jeremiah has shown us how he lived in pain and agony for the benefit of the Lord instead of living comfortably without service. And John the Baptist, we see that God has a plan in the world of impunity and injustice. And in Peter's prison, we see God has authority. God is in control in Peter's prison. Finally, in Paul's prison, we can see God accomplished the most significant victory in the world by spreading the good news all over. But here I'm going to focus only on Joseph, because if we have to talk about each and every one of these people, there's a lot to be learned and a lot to study also. Yeah. Joseph sold as a slave. If we look at the Psalm 105, chapter 105, verses 17 to 22, the Psalm said that, and he sent a man before them, Joseph sold as a slave. They bruised his feet with shackles. His neck was put in irons, till what he foretold come to pass, till the word of the Lord proved him true. The king sent and released him. The ruler of people set him free. He made him master of his household, ruler over all his possessed, to instruct his princes as he pleased, and teach his elders wisdom. This is clear, telling us that Joseph sold in slave is in plan of God to do the purpose of God. But why? Why prison? We can ask, but why prison? Just like C.S. Lewis said, perhaps we can say that it is the way to transform a dreamer into a wise man. Joseph was a dreamer. We all know his story. The last thing we read about Joseph, he was a dreamer. But the dreamer cannot fulfill the purpose of God. God does not hate the dreamers. He gives dreams. However, remaining stupid in the field of dreams does not qualify you at all to fulfill God's purpose. For us to be vessels of honor that fulfill God's intention, we must be treated by God, whom turned us from a dreamer to a wise man. When Joseph reached Pharaoh's house, Pharaoh's testimony of Joseph was not that he was an excellent dreamer, but rather that he was simple, insightful, wise, and explained dreams. Joseph started with dreams and end with interpretation of dreams. He starts with dreams, end with planning, thinking, and accomplishing. He left his father's home empty-handed. Even he can't defend himself, but now a powerful man. Used to hurt other people's feelings with his words, but now he watched every single word coming out of his mouth. His brothers hate him when he tells them about his dreams, until his father once rebuked him. His dream created a lot of problem between him and his brothers. In Genesis 37, 5-10, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hate him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We are bending a sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaves rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brother said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us while you actually rule us?" And they hate him all over, the more because of his dreams and what he had said. Then he had another dream. He told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." Come on, Joseph. Joseph keep dreaming and keep telling his brothers. He couldn't control his mouth, and he couldn't control any word coming out of his mouth, just like Jesus said that what comes from inside is worse than what goes inside. So Joseph keeps saying that. And we know anything in the book of James, James had a big lectures about the tongue, the little tongue in our mouth can create and destroy the whole world. This is what happened to Joseph. Joseph seems like he kept adding salt to the wound. Joseph failed to recognize the anger burning inside his brother. He has no wisdom and understanding of the situation around him. That anger burning deep inside his brothers led them to get rid of him, seize him, seizing the chance. The brothers threw the unsuspecting Joseph into the pit, and short a while, they spotted an Arab caravan passing the scenes, and the brothers sold Joseph to the traders. He was eventually brought to Egypt, where he was sold to Potiphar, one of the Pharaoh's ministers. Let's draw attention back to this. If we look at Joseph went through, although it seems like God was not present with him during his ordeal, in reality, God was present. He was not God does not leave him alone. He helped him to overcome all these obstacles he faced. God was working on Joseph from inside to outside. He was in the hands of God just as the clay was in the hands of the potter. He was to undergo all this trial for him to upright. In Genesis 39, verse 7, and after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph. In the verse, he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, with me here, my master has no concern about anything in house, and has put everything that he has in my hand." And this self-restraint earned him the nickname Joseph Joseph the righteous. That was not an end. It was just the beginning. Joseph successfully passed the test. And all this we see in this, what was happening to Joseph was a test from God. God put him to go through this because God wanted to straighten his tongue. And his tongue keep getting him into trouble with his family and brothers. And here God is testing him. God has another point of view that Joseph should undergo more training pieces. Here comes the big problem. Potiphar's wife turned the table on Joseph and told her husband that Joseph tried to seduce her. The angry master responded by placing his trustworthy ID in prison. And here, Joseph was just 17, but I don't know, the Bible didn't mention how old was he when he went to the prison. All we know that when he was released from prison, he was 30. That means Joseph probably, perhaps if we can guess his age, Joseph was around 19 or younger than that. He went to the prison and he spent all these years in the prison. And in prison, Joseph gained a new character and he became charismatic. His personality followed him to prison as well. And soon the prison director made him to be his right hand. Over time, his unique qualities expressed them in additional area. When the king bakers and royal butler was imprisoned, Joseph succeeded in interpreting their dreams correctly, anticipating the release of the barman and the hanging of the baker. God have given him another thing. God gave Joseph a new role. Instead of being a dreamer, Joseph now become someone who can interpret the dream. And Joseph has succeeded in that. So God keep working on him because God knows that the person who can later be in charge of people need to be in self-control, to control his mouth and to control his character and his behavior also. This is what God was doing with Joseph, but Joseph himself don't know all this. And perhaps people, even we can guess that if we didn't read the Bible from the beginning, we cannot guess that. Joseph had to wait 2 years before Pharaoh himself envisioned 2 dreams that no one of his advisors could explain. Finally, the barman recalled the young Hebrew from his prison days. The cupbearer recalled the Hebrew man from his prison days and suggested calling Joseph. And whoever is able to manage the prison at that time was Joseph. Joseph was the wardman of prison, gave him the responsibility of managing the prison and managing the people. And everything Joseph can do, God helped him to prosper. And when he was called, God knows that Joseph is ready to do the job. God knows that Joseph is ready to lead the people. Joseph was ready to be in charge of what is going to happen in the world to come. The Lord used him in managing of his people. Serving the Lord requires certificates. Here, in our world, everything we do, we need a certificate from the universities or from the schools we graduate from. And Joseph had kind of different certificate that are not obtained from the theological school or the theological school can, yes, theological school can, with my respect to theological school, they can help those who are qualified to serve God and also help those who are called. to do the work of God. But preparing for the true service to God requires a deep training from God. God himself is the one who can train you and put you in the right place to serve his people. This is what we saw God was doing with Joseph here. Joseph had to go through all this difficult, so many years of training, and to become a different person from a dreamer and person who ran his mouth without control to now a person who is mature, who can control and can see ahead and can plan to do the right job of God. Pharaoh, impressed with Joseph's wisdom, Pharaoh appointed Joseph to be his deputy, second only to him. And he tasked him with preparing the nation for years of famine. All this was happening, and Joseph, we can ask why Joseph, once he got that job, why he didn't go back and look for his parents and his brothers. We can ask this, and we are not going to know the answer for that question because we don't know what God's plan is. But Joseph has a big task in front of him. He has a lot of work to do in front of him. When he was in prison, Joseph tried to tell this cupbearer of the Pharaoh and the bread baker of the Pharaoh that he was innocent. He was thrown in jail for not doing anything wrong. I believe here Joseph feels that blaming other people for what they are doing to us are not the right thing. But you have to focus on the positives. Joseph changed from being a dreamer. Now he is trying to prove his innocence, but actually when he went to jail, he is the reason why he went to jail for. Joseph did so many bad things to his families, which made them to sell him away. I can't agree more than with Joseph that he didn't do anything, but he did it. He brought all this trouble to himself. If he didn't do it, he should have been staying with his other brothers. But instead, God has a plan. We don't know what God's plan at that time, but we are seeing the God plan is unfolding here. And Joseph becomes someone in a big position. He left his father's home just with nothing. He can't even feed himself. Now he become in charge of the person who become a person who is in charge of helping the whole world from disappearing from hunger, starvation. And Joseph became in charge of Pharaoh's house and the whole country. And if we ask why Joseph didn't send for his father, why he let his father to grieve all this time, and why he didn't call his father that he is alive, he is living in Egypt. He got a power. He have everything he need in his possession. Why he didn't do that? Many of the commentary can say that Joseph understood that this dream were actually prophecies and will be fulfilled in the entirety. In Joseph's first dream, his 11 brothers were born down to him. In the second, his father was included too. Joseph concluded that the first dream must be realized in its entirety before the second one will be fulfilled. he had sent message to Jacob, he certainly will have to come to see him immediately. And the second dream will have come to true before the first. So he therefore waited until after all the 11 of his brothers, including Benjamin, had come to him and to fulfill the first dream before revealing his identity to his brother, and he instructed them to bring Jacob down to Egypt. I think this makes a lot of sense because Joseph understands these dreams are the prophecies of the God. So in order to this dream to be fulfilled, he wants his brothers to come. And we have seen that his brothers came there looking for the food, and they all bow to him without knowing him, but their eyes are darkened. They don't know the young brother who they sold. Probably that was maybe over 13, 14 years. Joseph have grown to be someone different and dressing king's dress and putting this crown gown, and he looked different, and his brothers cannot recognize him. So what is important here, Joseph wants the prophecy to take its place. And in this story, we understand that when the brothers came to Joseph, they went back home and they brought their father to Joseph, and the prophecy was fulfilled, and they live in Egypt. And one of the things I try to bring here is that the person who sold Joseph into slavery, his name is Judah. And if we try to connect that with a person who sold Jesus to slavery, his name was also Judah. So there is comparison here with the name of Judah. And another thing is there are two people in prison with Joseph. The king, yes, two people in prison with Joseph. And these two people, if we try to put them in place of two criminals crucified with Jesus, the other one saved his life and Jesus remembered him. And here, the other one, in Joseph's story, the king cut his head off and the other one was restored back to his job. So there's a lot to be learned from this story. We know that with this suffering of us during this time, we can remember also our sins in this holy time of the old saints. Every person going through in tribulation of coronavirus and the other diseases and many things happening in our life, we have to remember them and appreciate the gift God is giving us, and we have to thank God for every single life of people we lose during this time. And thank him.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. When you said the topic was prison, I thought you were going into a jail cell and you were going to somehow talk about how we could help prisoners out. But this really relates to our own lives, and especially at a time like this with what we're going through, thinking about that kind of prison and maybe the benefits it'll have for us one day down the line.
Yes.
is wonderful. Thank you.
There's also a sort of direct line from there to, people who are imprisoned, literally imprisoned falsely these days. How do you endure? You remember God's in charge, just like Samson said, and we don't understand why, but you know, how do you thrive in conditions like that? And it does apply to our lives right now at the moment, unfortunately, due to the pandemic for all of us. There was a New Testament example. You remember Peter and Paul, all those guys in prison? What did they do? They sang. They converted their jailers. They helped other people, you know. It's hard to live that way when you've been unjustly imprisoned. But that's our calling. Some would say we're imprisoned in this life.
Like Martin.
The word that comes to mind for me is resilience.
I saw Resurrection's resilience today. Wow. And I saw those of you who are resiliently at home too.
But that piece of resilience is what it comes to mind because I've been observing how my granddaughter, 12-year-old granddaughter, is handling this pandemic, and her resilience is just amazing to me. The things she thinks of to do, to occupy herself and to view the world. And if you don't have that kind of resilience, it's very, very, very hard.
Depression is very real. You know, it's easy to sink into. Somehow a 12-year-old helps buoy us out of it, you know?
I think we're born with it, and somehow life kind of wears it down.
It reminds me of looking forward to, not looking forward, but looking back at Martin Luther King's prison, when he was in prison unjustly, and when they were singing and being together and not taking on the burden of what society was trying to put on them when they were in prison.
So they lived biblically there.
Yes.
It's hard to live biblically in prison, but when you can, you win.
Martin Luther King was the example of resilience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pam, did you want in here?
Hi, yes, Samson. The insights were wonderful. And when you think about how he was a teenager, Joseph, and like his tongue got him in trouble with his brothers. But then later, when he was in charge, like you say, to save not only Pharaoh's house, but the country of Egypt and the whole world, so to speak, that dream was fulfilled when they came back and bowed before him, the brothers. And it's wonderful for Clem and me. We were talking, saying that the concept that God is always with us, even through our mistakes. Obviously, Joseph had good intentions, and I mean, God is great, and it's just very encouraging, the whole message. Thank you, Samson.
Thank you.